We have today Mrs. Lata Vaidyanathan, a renowned principal and a veteran educationist. She was principal of Modern School Barakhamba Road. During her tenure, for more than 15 years, she brought about academic restructuring in educational programs of the school. A national awardee and a most sought after principal for her being a member of most of the schools in Delhi and NCR. She has been a member of NCERT's Advisory Committee, CBSE, and many more organizations. She has been director of Terry Prakriti School, first green school in NCR and Delhi. Director of Aid Easy School, and now director of Gyan Bharati School, Saket. She is known for her academic effort, and she knows how she turned the school into a very, very special oriented, and of course, a very good friend and well-known principal of NPSC. She's been a very special member and has been really helping a lot all the schools. A very good friend of mine. I take this opportunity to welcome Lata. Thank you so much for coming and being Lata.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Nice to have you. Lata, I will be asking you few questions because people have been showing interest to know from you. First of all, I would like to know your views on education during this, paradigm shift, the changes which have taken place, the virtual classroom, and of course, online. So all the changes, this paradigm shift. What are your views on education for this?
Come March and the whole world turn around, not just India. Therefore, this to be alive in such a phase, I would say, is an experience in itself. No one would have ever imagined that we would be around when something called as a pandemic hits the world. Having said that, I like to say that when everything closed down, the aviation sector, the travel centers, the hotel industry, the tourism industry, practically everything shut down. Even schools closed down, but academics and education did not, because like the frontline warriors of the health sector, education warriors sprung up from all sides of the world and also our country, and all our schools responded overnight as if that was their prime duty. People shifted gears. It just happened. Everyone moved on to the online platform because they knew that academics must not stop. The world of children would come crumbling down. Schools and parents would have created a lot of anxiety for themselves if teachers had not responded. So one of the feelings that I get very strongly is that learning will go on. And the more difficult it gets, the more beautiful is the challenge. And therefore, everyone responds. I felt that right at the start, while everyone took on to the technology tools, because all were in different stages of growth, the young responded much faster. Some people like us learned it from the young ones. What did we learn? We learned technology. We learned the new vocabulary of all the tools and tech tools that we used. We learned that there were many platforms through which this could be delivered, and part of which we were already doing it in school, but not having children in front of you and having them on the screen was a new experience. But everyone responded. They soon realized that there was this very energetic Zoom platform. They soon realized that there was the Microsoft Teams, the Google Classrooms, the WebEx, and many other such platforms with a lot of other tools that could be used to make academics interesting and also the deliverables possible. What is the problem? I don't think right now we have the scope to discuss the digital divide. We are told that just about 23% of the urban population and less than 3% of the rural population has access to technology, access to internet, and access to the bandwidth, which would make this possible. Therefore, to believe that these were the only platforms through which education was being delivered is incorrect. Of course, everything could not be done on these until people specialized and understood how to go about it. So people used WhatsApp, people used emails, people used their own educational portals, and somehow managed to connect to children and tell them what exactly they should be hearing or what exactly they should be doing. But technology and online education has a different environment than what happens in schools. We are one teacher in a classroom or a little more sometimes. We have the same environment, children sitting in the same uniform and well within a defined space where we could watch the interactions, where we could pick on children who were not responding and make by corrections as we go along. Unlike today, where every child feels that you're the only teacher teaching that just one child, the atmosphere and the environment in the home belongs to the family, the parents who may or may not be sitting and watching, and the home bedrooms and drawing rooms and study rooms being converted into study spaces. So there's a phenomenal difference. Environment at home, the availability of technology, these are infrastructural things I'm talking about. And there's more to it. People with or without access, looking at neighbors, borrowing cell phones, a whole lot of it. But right now, what we're talking is only about the infrastructure. And in very oversimplified ways, we are referring to it because it's not as simple as this. Then the real responsibility dawned on schools, and everybody went into hours and hours of training the teachers to make sure that this online education is well delivered. So there was training, there was change, and we also realized that online learning right now, to be very honest, I think most of the schools are still in the school mode of delivering lessons, completing syllabi, responding to the needs of children, etc. But in a deeper sense, when we examine at the end of these 3-4 months of wanting to deliver good quality education, we know that when it is online education, the students will have to take responsibility for their own learning. And when we say they take responsibility for their own learning, we don't have to be too shocked about the ministry's circulars or the CBSE or any other agency's diktats saying that there'll be limited screen time for early education. There will be just about 2 hours for primary education, just about 4 hours for senior school education. We don't have to be worried because those are not just the teaching times. Those are the instructional hours in terms of sending them flipped learning passages in completely changing over the way the child will need to take responsibility for his personal learning. And therefore, these times are not difficult. We may have limited screen time, but the children have enough time to work on tasks assigned. However, again, this is not true or just adequately explained for preschool and primary school, because there the parent has to sit with the child, and which, let me tell you, is not something that we can take for granted. So there are challenges which we'll speak very briefly about in a later section. But here, now the responsibility in the educational delivery is to marry these three. You need the technology tools, availability and adaptability and training. Then you need complete understanding of the changed way in which curriculum and curriculum reforms have been conveyed to teachers in terms of, a new academic calendar and revised calendars. Well, that's another part of the game, but anyway, it's curriculum all the same. And the third one is the pedagogy of learning. How does what pedagogical tools communicate the curriculum to the child through technology and through online learning. So these are the three arms of what we need to work at deeply. I think I want to...
Yeah, yeah. Fine, fine, fine. Carry on, carry on.
Okay, I should carry on? Okay, in that case, Usha, my area of interest, particularly because curriculum is prescribed, will come from the board, will come with circulars from MHRD and the NCERT. There is a set way of doing things. However, up to class 8, we have enough freedom to do what we want. For that matter, in dispensing knowledge, we have freedom across. It is only the examination requirements which will bind us in certain ways. But otherwise, the way in which education needs to be delivered will depend on very superior and deep understood pedagogical practices. I can at least think of 3. There are many, I'm told, but I can think of at least 3. The first one being that if children have to take responsibility for their own learning, which is incumbent to the system, then if we want the children to take responsibility for their own learning, one of the tools by which we can stand by their side and make that qualitative learning happen is through project-based learning approach. And project-based learning is not about projects. It's a pedagogical tool. And PBL, if I just substitute one word and call it purpose-based learning, then we won't confuse it with projects. And, after telling them how this can be done, somebody just gives you one good project of, a Qutub Minar or a Taj Mahal and say it is done, or a working model of a science and say it is done. That is not project. So let's just change that word, as someone rightly said, to purpose-based learning, and the whole world will look different. In the purpose-based learning, there is a deep question that we ask. That question that is about deep thinking. A question, for example, if you have done something on environment, and if you can ask, what do you think will happen if all the birds from your environment disappears? Or if you have had a lesson on the various reformers like Raja Ram Mohan Roy or the Arya Samaj and the DAV movement and all that came through in history of just India. And if you said to your children, what do you think, how do you think you can change the world for better in terms of human evolution and civilization if you were to use your own voice? If we can ask questions like this and then group the children in classes for them to explore, there'll be deep inquiry. After a very searching question, which will set the grounds for their learning, there will be deep inquiry. When they go into deep inquiry, they will use multiple tools. They may ask Google, they may go conduct a survey, they may come back and do the analysis. And when somebody does an analysis of data which is got, it is bound to be on the higher levels of the Bloom's taxonomy. They will move away from just information and knowledge to analysis and creation and evaluation. And therefore, you will find that as they move up, their own learning becomes that much more powerful, never to be forgotten, because they found the learning. After the learning, how do they present what they have learned? So they once again get back to their teams and collaborate, and each one of them says, this is the area I will explain. And they explain what they have learned and come back to certain conclusions of how it has changed. And here is the point I like to make, that this is what I think, in my opinion, is competency-based, learning outcome-based education. Something they started with is they are now competent enough to apply it through the 21st century skills of communication and collaboration and working through inquiry and finding solutions to real life problems, that is when the competency-based learning outcomes is achieved by not self, but by the whole team. They learn then to share their knowledge, share their strengths, and make sure that nobody in their team is weak or is left behind. Not leaving behind, having the learning outcomes right, getting competent and evidence of their competency being visible, what more would you ask for? That's a lot more than 2 pages of a textbook that says very little. Well, the textbook is not to be blamed. I think we can charter our own course. So to me, the PBL is an extremely powerful tool. And the outline that I've given you is just a very short one, because we need to draw these triangles, saying a deep question, sets of inquiry, areas of learning, deeper finding out, and then presenting what they have learned. And if they find a gap, going right back to start all over again and documenting all of this. If they do all of this after your instruction of 10 minutes, I think 2 hours or 4 hours is good enough time for people to learn. So PBL is one smart pedagogy. We also understand that post-COVID, the new normal is going to be very different. So we all understand that there has to be blended learning. This is the other term we are all getting used to. And blended learning could have taken place when schools were on. This can take place when schools are off. So as a methodology of learning, I think we need to really get on so that all tools that we have, for example, if you ask them to find out where all do we have black cotton soil and how does it grow, I think automatically it goes into a blended learning form, even if you taught them face to face in a classroom. Because if you're going to ask them, show me through maps, where are the areas of black cotton soil? I think they will have to download from Google, go to the maps and search and tell you whether it's Maharashtra, whether it is parts of Andhra, whether it's parts of Punjab, where all the soils are available and what kind of vegetation, what kind of climatic requirements. So I feel that blended learning is a methodology then and now, explored now more because of the compulsions. And if in the process of learning you use pedagogies like project-based learning, if you use pedagogies which include the asynchronous ways, including flipped learning and stuff like that, then I think we'll go a long way. And I can see very excited beginnings. But associated with this is the assessment. Now, when we want to assess student learning, all of us are aware that there is assessment of learning, assessment for learning, and assessment as learning. The assessment of learning is the most primitive form of learning. A paper and pen test to say I've covered 4 chapters and these 4 chapters knowledge is going to be assessed, which is what, because it serves the purpose of equity and access, therefore it is much used even today as a standardized way of evaluation. But that does not communicate anything. 1 time or 2 times paper and pen test doesn't tell you anything. I think we should do away with any kind of testing of preschoolers. Just send them descriptive feedback on all aspects of their developmental growth, whether it is physical, whether it is cognitive, whether it is socio-emotional, social, or whatever.
Or any,
yeah, whatever. And when it comes to primary school, just focus on the numeracy, literacy, and their theme-based learning, and include all of this into this and test them through various means. Test is a bad word because evaluation and assessment basically is about telling us whether we are doing good enough. If they are not learning, then what are we providing for? So assessment essentially is a feedback, diagnostic, remedial. So if we keep on bettering the quality of our instruction and learning and their doing, then I think the assessment for learning will make it that much more loaded and beautiful. So we need some of the ways of doing it, and it can be continuous. So it can be through, the Google Sheets for some of the MCQs, so that they're able to sort out the answers from a variety. If I were to say 2 and 2 is 4, 5, 6, 7, and they need to give me the right answer, for example, through an MCQ, they still need to do it. It is not as simple for them as it is for us. And if we were to say that, if we can frame questions intelligently for MCQs, because even MCQs, we can do a full 2-hour webinar on the kinds of MCQs that we can do. Just that. So it is possible to do it, and that should give us sufficient feedback. There are things which they can do and tell us. There are viva ways of finding out whether they have actually understood. They can debate a quality. We can use a variety of quiz. And now look at the tools. You have a Quizlet, you have a Padlet, you have a Flipgrid. You can do so many ways in which you can actually assess. Therefore, to me, the assessment for learning is more important than assessment of learning. But the most exciting is the assessment as learning. Because if we do that at whichever level, minus the standardized tests, that is when you really feel the power of the teacher or the guide or anyone else who's helping them learn. Because you talk less, they talk more. And when it comes to using these tools, because technology is best used in these times, and when you put up, let us say there are 8 write-ups on a Padlet, and you're telling them to self-assess or peer assess, and it's there in front of them and you for you to be excited about this, and it just happens. You know what? The real thing, however, is the transparency of the beautiful job. You have to be very good and train the teachers on the tooling of creating good rubrics if you want to do this. And creation of these good rubrics is criterion-based learning. You have to be very clear what is the criteria of your learning, and having made that, you share that with the learners. It's therefore absolutely transparent. There is no competition. There is levels of learning to which they will constantly move. That is the excitement of this journey, towards which our journeys are difficult, but at no stage is this excitement less. And I'm sure we teachers, we principals, we directors, we educators, by and large, have a lot of task ahead of us in getting the flock together, because ultimately we tell our teachers, what's your result? We stop asking that question. We stop depending upon 1 mark says it all, 1 exam says it all. And let's use this opportunity never to get back to the old ways of doing things, and let the excitement of learning take over.
I think, Lata, you have covered up almost all the gamut of questions that I had in mind. But I'm so happy that you have covered up that how, and given examples also. You have given your experiences and the examples that how, and very honestly, that the children are the ones from whom we are learning. So we are learning from the younger generation. And the best part is that the teachers, we must applaud them that they became the warriors. The principals are there to guide them. Educators are there to guide them. But they are the ones who really came forward, and they're working day and night, preparing themselves for this new paradigm shift for which they were not ready at all earlier, but they have done it. So thank you so much. But then before I really come to another point, what I really want is that I have a circular of CBSE in which we have talked about pedagogical leadership. So I'll just take up those few points, and then I want your comments on that. See, all principals of affiliated schools of CBSE, we have to have a crucial role to play in the evolution of the teaching learning ecosystem as the head of the pedagogical leader of their school. And in the role of this pedagogical leader, the principal is expected to take the following points. What? The first, lead, guide, support the teaching and learning processes, which you talked about, right? Lead, guide, support, and the teaching and learning processes, which you talked about. The second one, direct the entire focus of all school activities towards the students' learning and acquiring necessary competencies. The competencies also, the core competencies and the learning outcomes you have talked about. Prepare annual pedagogical plan of the school. By designing and developing annual plan, I think that, as principals and, as leaders, people can do it.
Do
And
it,
then
yeah.
promote innovative pedagogy. That in any
Yeah.
case, because of the paradigm shift, that innovation has already come. Ensure joyful learning at all levels. That we talked about, that how you make it more interesting, more, comfortable
No,
for the
there's another
children.
thing. Usha, there's another thing when we talk of joyful learning. You know, right. There's another interesting thing when we talk about joyful learning. You know what? When we do not give children material to memorize without meaning or outcome being understood, then it is not joyful. It is joyful when they find out for themselves and believe that the body of knowledge they know actually belongs to them because they found it, because they experienced it, because they made it happen.
There's another
And
point.
okay,
Develop school-specific resources for teaching and learning. That, of course, with the
love
NCRT
it.
and the CBSEs, they have already given us so much of e-content that is not difficult. Then
Yeah,
ensure proper in-house training of teachers in the school. That also,
it's been done.
because in-service training is a must for all the teachers. Then
Yeah,
to be update of all the new ideas and tools. In any case, there is no choice. We have to have new ideas and tools. Without that, you cannot manage. Then to
yeah,
be up to, effort to learn more from the best of practices of other schools. That also, now people are exchanging,
yes,
they are talking to each
absolutely.
other. The podias are there, they are exchanging and they are sharing the views with each other. The board has not laid down the structure or format of the annual pedagogical plan, as the board respects the academic autonomy of every school.
Wow.
That is the
Thank God.
beauty of the CBSE. They expect us to go for it and do it. Now, keeping all this in mind and looking at the changes that which have taken place, I want to know from you: do you think that there is a separate kind of, a different change in, when we have to bring the change in pedagogy? Do you think there has to be something different, online teaching, or and having some other points along with this? I think we have covered up almost all the points which were given to us by CBSE, right? And if you have anything else to add up, you can see. Then I have the final question to you.
Okay. So the other thing I have to add to this is that if we
Yeah.
do not join in this joyful way of learning for students and hand holding wherever required through separate sessions, because everything is not finding out by themselves, particularly in the board going classes, then there is one more aspect, which is their emotional aspect. They learn from each other. Thank God that we have talked about how they form groups and how they can explore and how aspects can be done. All that we have talked about. And yet, what we are presenting to ourselves as excited educators, because the changed format seems to be doable, deliverable, and exciting, we have forgotten that everyone likes the touch. The tech and the touch debate will always go on. Nobody can stop it. And let me
Cannot.
tell you, I am pining to be back in school, seeing children, touching them and talking to them. If I am like this at this age, where I can have a lot of resilience through my experiences to enjoy this phase of my life, I can understand the young adolescent children who find it difficult without friends, the very young ones who don't know what is happening. So the emotional stress requires to be addressed by the counselors, by each teacher being a counselor, by all stakeholders, including parents and the community at large, the extended family at large, to play together, to eat together, so much so that in the even online for the younger children, we are doing tiffin time together, we are doing playing together, we are doing stapu and skipping and which and yoga, of course. Doing all that is a part of physical development, but it's also playtime. Let's not forget that the fundamental word with the preschool and the primary school is play. And if we look at in how many ways play as a word can be interpreted, it is a PBL in itself. You play with the toys, you go for to watch a play, you play on the steering of a car. There is enough to talk about plays. And on the other side, the young who know their we are talking to the Flipkart generation. Let's not forget that. These are the millennials who come with their own strategies of work and learning by themselves. We are talking to generations which have gaming as their forefront arena. We are talking to generations that can make apps by themselves without you anywhere near them. If you're talking to the generation, then what is the challenge before us? We teach, they say, sorry, ma'am, bandwidth low, I can't put myself, and they're still in their pajamas. So and then there is enough cyber default. There is enough lack of cyber hygiene. There are children who are not doing things well. There are children who are destroying themselves. I think that responsibility, we need to carry it on our hearts and shoulders to make sure that we don't lose a single child, and we don't make sure whether the child, and therefore the diversity, celebration, acceptance, whether they are children with difficulties in learning or they are children who are gifted and therefore cannot sit quiet. And if there are children whose minds and hormones are pumping, we need to stand by them and not be accusatory. If we fail, don't blame them. Find another way. Be generous. Be by their side. They are going through very difficult times, not just you and me.
Yes, yeah. So for the holistic development, it's very important to have the parents, teachers, the entire community together and see that we all grow together. There's a positive attitude towards everybody, even at home. Even the teachers show the same kind of kindness, love, affection. As you said, a lot of programs are going on. I really admire the kind of programs that teachers have created and the clubs in the evening, that they have so many programs, but then they are all working on that. Now,
Yeah.
so thank you so much to that point. Now I'm coming to the last point. According to you, how to restructure the schools as and when they reopen?
So when the schools reopen, there will be restructuring. First of all, the infrastructural security with regard to what I call COVID or pandemic security will be the first infrastructural requirement. And there are a lot of guidelines that have come from WHO. There are guidelines that have come from the ministries. There are guidelines that are coming from the states. There are guidelines coming from everywhere which can be enumerated, and we actually need to do a checklist to see whether all those are in place. Right from sanitizing tunnels, shoe care, clothes care, hand wash, regular sanitization, all of this, which are a good list of 40 odd points. I don't think we need to list out these points because they are available on all sites. So first is the infrastructural care and absolute assurance of safety so that we don't have any problems. The second one is that how will the teachers come? Maybe all teachers come to school, but children come in rotation because of social distancing will become one of the major features. Because unless there is a cure or unless there is 100% immunization through vaccines or other modes and means, I think this blended form of learning will happen with rotational students coming in. Working in shifts may become a new norm, but all this will be accompanied. Let us say the problems are not so easy. We have to transport children. There are residential schools. There are other requirements of the fields and games. There are requirements of working together inside laboratories. So I think a lot of changes will come, but when it reopens and everything is normal, I don't want everyone to slide back into the same way of teaching and learning. Let us take advantage of the situation and bring into our classrooms, into our systems, into our pedagogical planning, in our lesson planning, in the ways in which we assess all the changes that will make the learning quality superior. That is what I'm looking forward to. And I think that will happen because we are under compulsion, and we will not let this body of work which the world has engaged in as in the teaching community to go waste. We are learning from each other. We don't know it all even now. We are learning from each other. We are, like the doctor said, we now know to handle our patients better than we did earlier. I can tell you that we now know to handle our students better than when we started. And we have a long way to go. The journey is continuous. The journey will be difficult, but the journey is exciting. Let's keep all the good things that we learned and continue to learn more from each other. We don't know it all.
Okay, Lata, thank you so much. I think